when we have relationships with people, if we're not fully accepting of ourselves, we're always holding off and putting that mask on a little bit, right? It's like, oh, I need to show up to work as this person, and then I need to change masks when I'm with my friends or when I'm home. Like, they see this side of me.
Right.
Where that erodes relationships is when you're having genuine interactions with people and you have to pause to remember which mask you have on at the moment, or they sense that little bit of hesitation. The thing that it does is it adds distrust. And now they wonder, what is this person not being honest about? What are they hiding?
Welcome everybody to another episode of Unleash Your Greatness, and I am excited to introduce Andy Vargo today. He is a life coach, comedian, a fun guy. He's also a author and a speaker, and his company or his message is all about own your awkward. And I'm excited to have him on because he's a real fun guy. We've chatted before, and I'm excited to have him share his message and his story about how you can own your awkward. So, Andy, welcome to Unleash Your Greatness. I appreciate you being here.
Well, thank you so much, Adam. I just appreciate the chance to be on here and be part of your Unleash Your Greatness movement. I think that is awesome. I'm excited about it. I think, we've chatted. I felt like it was a great conversation. I can't wait to do more.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you're a life coach. You help people get over those things that hold them back in life. That's what life coaching is all about, right? And part of your thing is to get or own your awkward. And that's one thing that I, for sure, I want to obviously get into your story and how you came up with that. But one thing that I've always struggled with since I was a young, shy kid with a learning disability, to own my awkward, because I think we all have our awkward quirks and weirdness to us, regardless of who you are. We all have those things. So I love the message and the fact that we can be ourselves and we can be who we are meant to be and be okay with that. So, I love that story. But I guess I want to, or that message, I want to get into your story though, and kind of how you came to be so passionate about helping people to own their awkward and to just be who they are meant to be. So if you can just share a little bit of background of where you came from, how you got into coaching, and why you do it.
Sure. So to answer your first question about, how I got to own my awkward and why I'm so passionate about it, it's because I never did for so long. And that's really what drives me to help other people do it. Because for myself, I wasn't comfortable in my own skin. When I was 40, I realized I needed to come out of the closet, be okay being gay, mix things up in my life, and have that not be something that just holds me back. Because I spent so much of my life not being myself and pursuing the life I wanted to live. And what happens is when you're focused on hiding all your mistakes, hiding your imperfections, right. Let's say you're spending 30 or 40% of your energy on that. And I see people do it where they're continually reading self-help books, always trying to be a different person. Well, that 30 to 40% of your energy would be so much better spent pursuing what you want to do to be happy. And I realized, this is all energy that's coming away from living my best life. And if I added that time and energy and focus back into doing the things that I want to do and writing books and helping people, then I'm going to be so much better at those things. And I didn't initially plan to get into life coaching, but I was helping friends and people were reaching out when I started doing speaking and asking for advice. And I realized that really was my calling, was to actually help others get through whatever they're dealing with.
Yeah. So it was just this natural progression for you to go from, coming out of your shell coming out, if you will, uh, and then helping other people live the life that they're meant to live, and just progressively moving into the coaching industry. And that's awesome. And I think most people get into coaching or want to be a coach because they feel that pull to help people. And it starts out so simply, like you kind of described. I was helping my friends. I was helping, these people that were kind of seeing what I was doing and asking how that was going or whatever. And uh, I would sit down and have chats with them and kind of help them learn what you have learned. And I've had a similar experience in my life where people would ask, well, I noticed a difference in you as you have changed for the better. At least most people think it's for the better, where I came from in my journey. And they've asked, what did you do? What are you doing now? Why are you doing the things that you're doing? And so, yeah, that's amazing. And I guess I want to kind of jump back a little bit to, being a 40-year-old man, and you were married to a woman, had kids, and then you decide, you know what? I want to change my entire lifestyle. And that must have been super, one, difficult for you to make that decision. And two, such, being so vulnerable to put that out there and to, I mean, that's a complete 180 in your life, right? Like,
Right.
um,
Yeah.
it
It
takes a
was
lot of
definitely not
courage.
anything I ever saw happening.
Yeah. But it takes a lot of courage to do something like that, to do a complete 180 of where you are and then shift gears and go somewhere completely opposite. And I applaud you for taking that step to, or leap, if you will, because a lot of people won't. They won't go after living the life that they want. They won't go after, even in those circumstances where it's so difficult like that. So I guess what can you kind of share about your train of thought as you were kind of like debating that situation where, like, do I make this move? Do I tell my wife? Do I tell my kids? Do I just kind of live with what's kind of bundled up inside of me?
Right. No, that's a really good question because it's an interesting process that developed over time, obviously.
Sure.
But there were kind of two pivotal moments for me.
Yeah.
One was a week before I was 40, and my ex-wife said to me, "I don't know what to do for your birthday. If you don't tell me exactly what you want, I'm just gonna, have a nice dinner at home with the kids and whatever." And in that instantly, the first thing that came to my mind was, I want to be with somebody who knows that I would like to have a bigger party with my family over and do X, Y, and Z. And it was disheartening that we were that disconnected, that 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 wasn't an automatic response. But I wasn't comfortable. I was in a position at work with a boss that was pretty, micromanaging, over the top, and I wasn't happy at work. I wasn't happy at home. I never stood up for myself in any of these situations. And I
Right.
just had this moment where I realized, oh my gosh, my whole life, I need to change it, or it's never going to be, I'm not going to have fulfilling relationships. I'm not going to have good situations. And we had been not in the best relationship at home for several years, and had talked about getting divorced off and on. And I always, think you're going to put in the good fight. We're going to stick together. This is the right thing to do. And the realization for me a few months later, after that moment, was that if I can't be true to myself in my relationship, I can't give my best to the relationship. And I also can't demand the best for myself. So I can't tell the other person they need to treat me well. And so I'm not getting the best of them and they're not getting the best of me.
Right.
And so it really came down to, if we're going to move forward, you need to know this about me. And we need to work through this side of my life. It wasn't, hey, I'm leaving you because I want to go be with a man. It's, if we're going to try to make this work, there's more that I'm struggling with and thinking through. And then, things kind of fell into place where it was obvious where to go. But you're right. It was the scariest thing I ever had to do. It made me question every time I talk to somebody, what's their reaction going to be? And, that was 5 years ago. So I'm in a good place about it now.
Right.
But, when you step into that place, I guess for your listeners, when you have something that's scary, the thing that can be very motivating is when you think about the alternative if you don't do that thing. And when that gets scarier, when living your life in misery and not being honest about who you are or being able to just relax and be yourself, when you think about doing that for another 40 or 50 years compared to facing the pain and getting through it over, a few months or a year or a couple of years, all of a sudden it looks a lot less scary to do that thing.
Yeah. Living that life where you're congruent with who you want to be is such an important factor. And I think everybody puts a facade or a mask on to some extent, depending on who you're with, right? Like if you're with the people who are closest to you, it's probably less. So, but if you're meeting someone for the first time, I think everybody kind of puts a little bit of a mask on or whatever. But uh, for the most part, if we can live who we're meant to be in a way that is congruent with how we feel, then we're going to be so much happier. We're going to be able to connect more fully. Cause that's one thing that you said you were missing with your wife was you didn't have that connection. You guys, she didn't understand what you wanted. And there could be multiple reasons why that was, right? One of them was obviously you weren't being congruent with who you felt you should be, um, but when we are congruent, we can connect with others. We can love ourselves and be more open and willing to put ourselves out there. So I love that message. And do you have
Yeah,
any
and
comments on that?
no, I think that is so important in the way that you talk about it being congruent, because when we have relationships with people, if we're not fully accepting of ourselves, we're always holding off and putting that mask on a little bit, right? It's like, oh, I need to show up to work as this person, and then I need to change masks when I'm with my friends or when I'm home. Like they see this side of me.
Right.
Where that erodes relationships is when you're having genuine interactions with people and you have to pause to remember which mask you have on at the moment, or they sense that little bit of hesitation. The thing that it does is it adds distrust. And now they wonder, what is this person not being honest about? What are they hiding? And even though you're hiding your own insecurity, it makes them question if you're just completely a distrustworthy person, if you're trying to scheme them, if you're trying to hide the fact that maybe you don't like them as much as they think that you do. And so it adds that question of distrust, which as humans we end up making the story a lot bigger when we're facing other people. We start reading into what all the things we think it could be there for, and it could be a totally innocent thing from the other person's standpoint, as simple as they're not comfortable in their own skin and they're trying to figure out how to show up in the right way. And yet all we know is there's just not something there that's congruent.
Yeah, so true. And that trust, I love that you brought that up because, I've it's kind of a funny story. There's a coach here in Utah where I'm from, and he's kind of more of a local guy, but he puts on events and draws a pretty decent crowd, anywhere from 500 to 1,200 people. And we would go to his events, and he was this amazing person on stage, and he was everybody loved him. And my wife and I actually went to a different event in California, and he happened to be there. And we would watch him, and he was completely different than what we had seen at his event, right? And it was funny. We actually ran into him one time, and we're like, "Oh, hey, it's so and so." And I'm not going to mention names so that, uh,
Sure.
but hey, it's so and so, and we actually started chatting with him, and he was completely like kind of shut down, and my wife had just signed up for one of his higher end programs, and I said, hey, my wife is loving the program, that she's in, and his complete demeanor changed, like, oh, that's great, like he completely shifted his who he was. He put that mask on, and
Yeah.
it really really did cause us to lose a little bit of trust and faith in him, because it's like, hey, if he's completely different than he tries to be on stage, what else is he kind of hiding? So I agree 100%. Like that trust is such a huge factor. So I'm super glad you brought that up. That's so true.
Yeah. And, when we get to that point where we start questioning things, like we could look at that situation and say, okay, is he is he really a jerk behind the scenes and this is just a stage name? Or is it that, there are people who are actually shy even though they're off stage? I have a lot of comedian friends who will have the room cracking up in tears and laughter, and then as soon as they step off stage, they just shy away because they can't handle that in-person conversation.
Sure.
And but we don't know. It's just a question of we don't know what that answer is, and so that leaves us. And that's where when we look at ourselves, uh, I like to look at it twofold. One is we have to be careful about assuming other people's motives and then putting that on them. And then also for ourselves, we have to be careful that we aren't putting that mask on more so than we need to. And sure, you're going to shift your demeanor a little bit depending on the situation and being appropriate for a situation, but not to the point where you change your core.
Right. Yeah. So true. And I agree. We and to give that person individual or that person the benefit of the doubt, he has said, he's an extrovert and so yeah, when we all do that to a point. You get on stage and there's a huge crowd and you're going to be almost like a, I guess a little bit of an actor, if you will, but you can
Hmm.
still, I feel, be true to who you are, right?
Right.
And not just do a complete 180 and change. But anyways, I think it's so brilliant for you to say that when you're not who you are, you lose that trust when you're not true to who you're meant to be. And yeah, it's just it's so true. Um, so I want to kind of go back and pick your brain a little bit more on your journey. You come out of the closet. I hope it's okay if I say it like that.
Yeah, totally. It's totally fine.
You come out of the closet. Tell your wife and kids that you're a gay man and you want to get a divorce. And from there, you have this progression of helping people, and eventually you fall into coaching. Tell me kind of like what that shift from having a 9 to 5 job to now being a life coach where you're working with clients, and what does that mean to you? Like how does that affect your, for me, I love working with people. Like one-on-one is like one of the most exciting things ever. I love working with groups. I love working with doing an online course and things like that. But man, when you can sit down and just totally focus on that one person, it just lights me up. Like it's so exciting for me. So
Oh yeah, I'm definitely the same way because the groups are fun because there's the group of people and you see that, oh, all these people are maybe taking something and each of them might take something from this. But when it's one-on-one, you really get that tangible sense of what difference you may have helped a person make in their life. And it's that sense of hearing, I was able to make this happen this week because of our session last week. You're like, wow, that is so rewarding. Since I've started doing this, it's owning your own business in any regard is the most stressful thing you can do outside of family and raising kids and health type things. But it's a different kind of stress because there's such a reward knowing that what you're doing is something you're passionate about and that you feel very strong about the contribution you're giving to the world, that it's not that stressful when I put in the long day or I pulled the overnight or making videos or marketing or all the kind of things that you're doing that's always in the back of your head. But it's a completely different weight on your shoulders than, oh, I have to go deal with someone else's drama at work and I'm going to have to figure out how to make them happy for the next 8 hours and keep them off my back till I come back the next morning.
right.
And you're stressed for a reason that isn't fulfilling. And I think that's a lot of times where we're off, right? Because stress is there for a good reason. It helps motivate us and move us forward. But if the reward isn't there, then we're only enjoying the stress. And if we have all the stress, but you jump out of an airplane and it's freaky and you have the stress, but then you have the adrenaline rush of the view and everything else. And then hopefully your parachute opens and it's a good thing.
All right.
But, if you jump out of the airplane and the parachute doesn't open, that's kind of like, what it can be like if you're not fulfilled. And I'm not saying that the only way to that fulfillment is to have your own business, because you can be totally fulfilled going to work every day,
Absolutely.
but you need to find what that meaning is. And I used to sell toilet paper for a living and restaurant supplies, and that's the most boring category of products theoretically. But for me, there was a lot of fulfillment in that I was helping small businesses make better decisions, learn how to
Mm.
manage their supplies and stuff in a way that actually controls their costs and makes money for their business. So whatever situation you're in, you don't have to flip your life upside down as drastically as I did, but you can find ways to make that be more rewarding.
Yeah. Very cool. I agree 100% with finding the reward in whatever you're working on, and then work towards a goal to make it better. Your
Hmm.
life, your relationships, your anything, right? Uh, because you can find fulfillment in anything, in the most mundane, horrible thing in the world, and you can find some kind of beauty or reward in it, and then say, what else do I want to add to this, or what do I want to go to make it better, my life better, my life more fulfilled, and then work on that. So that's definitely something I've been, especially with COVID right now, a lot of, I see that as a theme, right? Over and over as we go into 2021. And something that I'm actually promoting pretty heavily is, 2020 was a hard year. It was tough for a lot of people. There was a lot of drama. There was a lot of lockdown and isolation and a lot of things that went on with politics and movements and whatever, right? But at the end of the day, we've got to look to the next year, 2021, and say, what is my intention to make this year better?
Right.
How can I move past all that and make it so much better? So, and I think we can do that in our everyday life with whatever we're facing. So,
Hmm.
yeah, that's awesome. Great perspective
And
to
I
have.
and I think it's important to remember that we're just following the status quo. So 2021 will not be any different than 2020 until we do something to change it for ourselves.
Yeah,
And regardless of what's going on in the world around you, you have to make changes to what you're receiving into your life and what you're putting out from your life if you want that to be any different this year. And it's a we have a great opportunity to do it. And I see people who have been doing it and were doing it in 2020 during the pandemic, but individually it's like, okay, where's my opportunity to move in the direction I want to go?
yeah, for sure. And to distinguish what you can control and what you can't control, because there's so much that's out of our control, but there is a lot that we can say, what's my mindset going to be in this situation or at this time going into 2021? You can have power over that. You absolutely can decide for yourself what your mindset's going to be. Sure, you can't uh, affect politics. You can go to rallies and you can be one of the crazy crowd people attacking the Capitol or whatever if you want, I guess. But at the end of the day, what's it really going to do? Not probably much,
Right.
in my opinion. But yeah, like there's so much we can affect, but there is a lot in our immediate world that we can if we choose to. So
Right. There's it's You mentioned that, it reminds me of an exercise that I work with clients on, and it's basically around the emotions of control and how you're dealing with it and
yeah,
accepting what you can and can't control. And I have a basically 3 column worksheet that I have them fill out. And the first column is all of your gripes around this situation or this change, right? So it's pandemic, I can't leave the house, I can't do this, I can't, blah blah blah.
right.
And then the second column is just a yes or no question. Is this in my control or outside of my control?
Mm,
So everything that's inside your control, you hit yes. Everything outside your control, you hit no. And then the beauty comes in that third column, where that's the action column. And in that column, the first thing is anything that says it's outside of your control, there's only one answer you can put down, and it's accept it and move on. And once you do that, you take these, 5 or 10 things you might be griping about out of the 20 things that you're upset about in your situation, and you take them off the list because you can't do anything about it. And on the other, you can say, okay, if I lost my job, well, I can look for work, I can sign up for school, I can update my resume, I can see a headhunter. and it starts giving you that control to take the power over the things that are within your reality to affect,
Mm.
and stop focusing all that wasted energy on things that you're just kind of complaining and moaning about, that really they're going to keep you in that zone that's going to keep you from moving forward until you accept them and just move on.
Yeah. So true. And what a powerful exercise for anybody, just like, oh, there's all this thing going on, and sometimes we get bogged down. I personally, I try to stay as much away from the news as I possibly can. I do have things that pop up on my phone about you know, current, breaking news, I guess, if you will. So I kind of know, honestly, what's been going on the last couple of days. I don't even know much about. I haven't got on CNN. I haven't done anything, just because there's so much that is out of my control. And when you decide that, yeah, that's really not in my control, and you let it go, that's such a powerful mindset to have, and or perspective, or whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, I can see that being a super powerful exercise for anybody who just feels like, man, the world is just bogging me down with uh, all this negativity, and there's all this anxiety around everything. And yeah, people need to be aware of that, and work through that. So that's a great exercise. And I think anybody can, anybody who's listening, I would think, and you probably have a special worksheet to work through it, but you could make a column and 3 columns, and work through that yourself. That's a great tool. So thank you for
It's,
sharing that.
yeah, for sure. It's really simple. I try to make everything just as basic as possible, because we get caught up in all the bells and whistles, and I do that myself, where it's like, oh, if I'm going to put a program out there, it has to have X, Y, Z, and I have to have all these things. But the reality is we just need time to sit down and talk and figure out a way to communicate, whether that's through a phone or a Zoom or, you know, in person. And we're going to start solving the problems. All the bells and whistles, those will come later or when they're needed, but they're really just distractions from focusing on the actual thing. Like you said, you can pull out a piece of paper and create 3 columns very easily.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, and so true. Like, just, I think what most people need to do is just start. Like, just
Right.
do something, even if it is a simple activity as pulling out a piece of paper, writing your thoughts down, creating 3 columns, whatever it is. Like, if you're struggling with feeling like there's overwhelm, or you're not being congruent with who you are, like we've been talking about, just pull out a piece of paper, a journal, anything, and just get your thoughts down. Because that mind dump, I guess, is what I like to call it,
Mhm.
helps so much. And you can visualize it, like, okay, yeah, this is where my issues that I'm dealing with right now are. I need to refocus on controlling what I can control. And anyways, yeah, super powerful. So um, awesome. Uh, I want to get into the own your awkward statement that you use for your company, because I think it's and we talked a little bit about it with your story, but tell me kind of how you came up with that, and what that means to you, owning your awkward.
Okay, so for me, owning your awkward, it's all about, we're all uncomfortable for one reason or another when we walk into a room full of people.
Hmm.
You could be self-conscious because of your height, or you could be self-conscious because of your size, your age, the way you look, whatever it is. It could be that you're just kind of shy, or maybe you're kind of boisterous and you're worried that you're going to be too much for the room.
Yeah.
I, my thing that I like to remind people about is that when we walk into that room, whatever it is that we're feeling uncomfortable about, someone is across the room equally as uncomfortable for the same thing, but probably for a different reason. If I'm walking in thinking I'm too short, someone's probably in there feeling like they're too tall and towering over the room. Or if someone's, you feel like maybe your age is the issue and you feel either too young or too old, you might be walking in feeling like, oh, I'm too young for this room, I'm inexperienced, I don't know anything that's going on. And you're looking at the person who's older than you, has more experience, and you're thinking, wow, look at all their experience, look at all the stuff that they know right off the back of their hand. And they might be looking at you going, look at all their fresh ideas, and I love their energy and excitement and willingness to learn. And yet, by actually being okay with that and saying, guess what, this is what I have to offer based on who I am, where I'm coming from, usually people love that more than anything about you. That's usually what endears people to you.
Yeah.
And so when we can own that and harness it, we're creating our best life and we're being successful because of that reason, not just in spite of it. It's like saying, you know what, I'm going to wear this, like the red badge, like on the Scarlet Letter, where she turns into this beautiful thing that it's
Yeah.
supposed to be this stigma. And I started doing these awkward thoughts, and a friend of mine, which were these little YouTube videos saying, hey, here's my thought for the day. And a friend of mine had called and he said, you know, are you trying to be serious? Are you trying to be quirky? I can't tell. I think you just kind of need to step into the awkwardness and just do it. And I was already using awkward as my brand. And that's really where I started shifting from just having awkward in the brand to being own your awkward, because it
Yeah.
really is about making it your thing.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love the message. I love the story of how it came about. And the funny thing is that so many times we get caught up in all these judgments of what we think other people are thinking of us, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, you go into a room and you're thinking, I'm too short, I'm too young, I'm too old, or whatever. There's the million other people thinking something about themselves, and they're not focused on you. Like 99% of the time, nobody is even going to focus on what they think. Sure, you meet certain people, and sometimes you're like, wow, that was an odd interaction or something like that. But at the end of the day, we all have our quirks, and we all have our insecurities that we think that other people are going to notice. And 99% of the time, nobody notices them. Like, it doesn't matter. Like,
Yeah. It's all that dialogue we're having in our own head.
yep, exactly. Yeah, exactly. That's what I guess that's a best way to put it, is all those negative self-talk that we have. And, I would say that the majority of people have more negative self-talk than they have positive self-talk. And if we can,
Mm-hmm.
change the weights of how that goes. Sorry, my dog
Right. Well,
is coming
and and I used to be that guy that would, go to the library and I'd get a stack of self-help books and I'd be like, okay, which issue am I going to solve today? And you're reading through the books and I'm going, okay, well, effective people get up at 5 a.m. So now I got to start getting up at 5 a.m. And then they do this and then they do that.
in.
And I would be trying to shift who I was to mimic all these different personalities or characteristics of what the picture of success was. And and I don't think that there's not value in self-help books. The books that I write are self-help books, so I'm not trying to talk myself out of a job here. But I think the important difference is that we need to use them to develop habits and activities and things, and learn ideas that could help us in our life, versus changing who we are at our core and ourselves. And if we're changing what we line up in our values and how we present ourselves to the world to be like somebody else, that's where the problem comes in. But if we're using them to help open up our greatness that's already there, then that's where it's done right. And I realized one day I just need to stop trying to be somebody else, because all of that energy was just taken away from being me.
Yeah. Yeah. So true. And I'm processing all you just said, because I I've fallen into that trap in the past where I've read a book and I'm like, oh, I've got to do this, and this, right? And then I do it, and yeah, some of it sticks, but oftentimes I'm like, well, really didn't work for me, and that's okay. I think we have to be okay with that, because I guess the thing that I've come to conclude about reading self-help books, and again, I'm a huge reader. I love reading self-help books. It's changed my life in so many ways. But you have to take what you can and implement what you can. And if you try to implement too much at one time, you're gonna fail. If
Right.
you can implement one thing at a time, then you can progress. But if you're like, okay, I'm going to start these 5 habits tomorrow, and you try to do that, like, it's just not going to happen. You're going to get overwhelmed. You're going to stop, and you're not going to implement any of them. So I think there's a fine balance there between finding what works for you, like you were saying, that still keeps you at the core, but
Hmm.
doesn't, but still allows you to grow and become somebody that you want to grow into. Um, so
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. It's critical.
Yeah. Um, so own your awkward. You teach people to own their awkward. What does that look like when you're working with a client and you're like, you know what, you just gotta own your awkward.
Hmm.
How does that look? Because I'm kind of interested in the shift that most people have when you bring that up and you start teaching them that.
Yeah. So primarily the clients that I'm working with are going through a life change, uh, whether they've had a change happen to them or they're planning for a change coming up. Either way, it's that's typically who I'm working with, and a lot of times it's someone who's either gotten divorced or they're kind of changing their identity one way or another, or they're relocating. And so typically when we're in a time of change, there's always a little bit of a identity crisis going on, because it's,
Sure.
well, what, even if you're relocating to a new area, and it's something as simple as that, as well, what things did I identify with from living in, Texas versus living in California? It's like, okay, well, if I'm now living here, do I still, are the same activities there, the same places that I go to, it's different crowds. So when we're stepping into a new situation in our life, we have to really kind of look at, what are the pieces of me that I want to bring to that situation, that I want to bring to the world. and and sometimes, like, I've had people who beat themselves up over how they're identifying themselves, because it's, one client that I had, he was a little bit scattered on what his interests were. So he, I'm going to be a ski instructor, and he'd go do ski instructing for a season, and then all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to write a book, so I'm going to start writing, and then pretty soon he's into singing or creating music, and has done all these different jobs. And which was really cool, because for me, and this is really what kind of owning that awkward comes down to, is I'm looking at him saying, wow, this is cool, all these different things you've experienced. But he was beating himself up because he saw it as a failure, because he never became the top of any of those things, or he didn't keep it beyond a certain length of time. And so for that person, the struggle was really, I'm not sticking with anything long enough to identify as a ski instructor or a musician or this. And so the work we were doing was to shift his thinking, to see that as a good thing, and say, well, why can't you be an explorer? Why can't you be an adventurer? And your thing that you do in life that you love doing is trying all these different careers, all these different hobbies. And it was really great to see that shift in his mindset, where he's like, oh, it's okay that I like doing different things. It's not unsettled. And so in that way, for him to own his awkward, it's to step into the world and say, hey, I can't pick any one thing, and I'm okay with that, but I can tell you how to start a million different projects. I can talk to you about all these different jack of all trades things. And it's things like that really help kind of get at what's eating at your core. When we sit down for a session, it's, where do you want to go, and where are you? And really what we're trying to identify is those roadblocks. And if that roadblock is just not being comfortable, committing to something or being on skin, then that's what we're going to learn how to own. You can own your awkward.
Yeah. Cool. No, that's awesome. And I think, what I guess what comes to my mind with that specific story you just shared is, lots of times we get this mindset that there's this path that we have to take, whether it's because our parents
Mhm.
expect us to, or society expects us to. And you are young, you go to school, you graduate from high school, you go to college, you get a job, you get married, you have kids, there's this progression that everybody kind of, society, if you will, kind of expects
Mhm.
of us. And lots of times we can find that that's not what we need to do. And
Right.
like you say, kind of find ourselves, own our awkward, and decide, I'm okay being the adventurer, or you know, the, the life coach, or, uh, in my case, the achievement coach, or the,
Mhm.
the guy who quit his job, like I did a year and a half ago, or almost a year ago, to do coaching full time, or the gay man, or there's a million things, right? And to be okay in that space and say, I don't have to follow anybody else's path. I don't have to be what everybody expects me to be. As long as I'm happy and I know who I'm supposed to be, that's okay. And to me, I guess that's how I kind of interpret in my mind, own your awkward. And then of course we're all quirky in our own way, and that's okay. That's fine. So
Right. Yeah. No, I think that's true. I like to think about like we're all just kind of beach balls, and if you look at a beach ball, it's got stripes all the way around it.
right.
And if I look at you holding up a beach ball right now, I can see a couple of the colors in your stripes. And I might know you're an achievement coach, and I know that you've got kids, and that I know where you live. And so these are a couple areas of your stripes that you see, but I don't see those other colors on the back. I can only see, primarily one color with a little bit of, I know a little bit of these other colors, but not the full story. But there are other people that see the family side of your life, or they're in your neighborhood, so they see that side of your life, or whatever those things are.
Yeah.
And so there's all these aspects, and it's okay that some of them show a little bit differently. But when we encounter people, it's like, what is all that? And I'll have people fill out that beach ball exercise, and I actually have it where you can list what those things are that you identify as.
Yeah. Yeah.
But with this client, we did a diagram of a soccer ball. I said, maybe you're not limited to just the stripes on a beach ball. Maybe you're a soccer ball or a volleyball, where we've got a lot more things going on, uh, because we get caught up, I think, too much in what we identify as and what we're supposed to be to the world, when in reality, it's a mix depending on the world we're around. And there's a fine line between putting that mask on all the time and changing who we are, versus pivoting the ball around to show more of what you have going on.
Yeah. True. I love that analogy. That's a great way to look at it, because yeah, there's always another side to everybody that maybe they're not willing or feel like they can share with other people, or they don't feel like being vulnerable. That's a big deal too. Some people are not comfortable sharing who they really want to be, and that could be hard too. So, um, I know for myself, it's always hard to be that vulnerable. It's hard to look weak, I guess, in our minds to other people, and being vulnerable sometimes makes us feel like we're looking weak, when in reality, it's really you're being strong, because it's
Mm-hmm.
hard. So, um,
Yeah.
I want to kind of talk a little bit about your book and what that's about. What Remind me the name of it again?
So it's called Own Your Awkward Life Changes. I got a copy right here.
Awesome.
So it's Own Your Awkward Life Changes, the complete handbook for mastering change.
Very cool.
It's pretty intense, in that it's got all these, I don't know how well you can see that, but it's got worksheets in it that you fill out for each step of change. And one of the worksheets is that one I was talking about earlier, where there's actually a page that is that exercise to look at change, look at what you can accept, and then what actions you can take. So it's basically the systems that I work my clients through when we're dealing with change. And it's things that, I've gone through: job loss, I've gone through relocating, I've divorced, coming out, relationship changes. And when I started coaching, I remember thinking, well, I don't know what I'm going to coach people on. They say find your specialty. And I was like, well, I keep changing everything in my life. I guess that's when I come back to the conversations I'm having with people, I was helping them through change. So I realized that really needed to be my focus. And so I had templates that I would give clients to work with. And then I thought, well, wouldn't it be nice if I just added a couple pages so they could have an explanation of each template in case they forget what we talked about, or those kind of things, or they want to come back to it later for a different change. And that turned into, well, now I need to add more here, and it just eventually turned into a book. So
Awesome. So, sounds like an amazing book with a ton of value in it to go through and evaluate, okay, how do I feel about this? Where am I at this point in my life? And really dig in deep on what you want, who you want to become, who are you, deep down, who is that awkwardness
Right. Yeah.
person inside of you. So where can people get a copy of the book? Is it on Amazon, your website? Where can they get a copy?
You can easily get a copy on Amazon or barnesandnoble.com, no matter where you're at. It's on my website at awkwardcareer.com. You can buy it there as well. Um, and then it's starting to pop up in some local bookstores here in Tacoma, but that'll be evolving over time. But yeah, the easiest way is if you're anywhere you want, just go to awkwardcareer.com or look it up on Amazon or Barnes and Noble. It's Own Your Awkward Life Changes by Andy Vargo.
Awesome. Very cool. So I'm also going to include links to where people can go and grab that in the description of this podcast and on YouTube so that they can find that as well. And also connect with you if they feel like they need some help in their life, connecting with themselves, connecting with the awkwardness and being okay with that, then they can absolutely connect with you and have you as a coach. And that's a pretty awesome niche, I would say, and a unique niche that you call yourself life coach, but you have branded yourself in such a way that it's amazing. And I think a lot of people can benefit from that, what you have to offer them. So um, yeah, awesome. I'm going to make sure everybody can connect with you who want to. So, in closing, I want to ask you one last question, and that is what I always like to ask at the conclusion of my interviews: is what would be the one to maybe three things that you would say someone who needs to unleash their greatness within themselves needs to do? What were those things that you would suggest?
Well, I think the first thing would be to be to sit down and have a real heart to heart with yourself and be honest about what it is that you bring to the world and what's getting in the way from you unleashing it. Sit down, really think through that, and know that if you had no obstacle of shyness or money or anything that you like was holding you back, what would that gift be that you have for the world?
Yeah.
And once you know that and believe in it, then it's just a matter of let's sit down and whether you are working with a coach or just calling a friend or whatever, sit down with somebody that you trust and have them be vulnerable enough to say, this is what I want to give to the world and I can't quite figure out how to get there. So whether you're sitting down brainstorming by yourself, bouncing ideas off of close friends or a coach or a mentor, you know, figure out how to do it. It's doable and the obstacles aren't as big as they are like the monster under your bed. Like, you're scared of it, you don't want to look. And then when you finally do look, it's like, oh, there's nothing there, or it's my slippers, and they just, cast a weird shadow. So be willing to take the steps, but first start out by identifying what that is.
Awesome. Yeah, beautiful. I love how you put that, and not let those things that the slippers in the corner who as a little kid you think might be the monster uh, casting a shadow on your bed or whatever. So oftentimes we let those things stop us. Fear of the silliest things in prevent us from moving forward in life. So I love that. I love the action steps that you have given people. And for those of you who didn't catch the action steps, go and do the three pillars because that's something anybody can do at home, as well as go grab a copy of his book, of Andy's book. And again, those will be in the description of the podcast as well as on YouTube. If you're watching this on YouTube, you can go and you can grab a copy of Andy's book, Own Your Awkward. Again, remind me the whole title.
Life changes.
Own Your
The complete handbook for master.
There you go. So, uh, Andy, any last words that you want to just leave the audience with before we end?
I would just say, make your life as amazing as you can by taking control of the changes that are in your life make them yours and own awkward. And Adam, thank you so much. I really enjoyed being on your show today.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Andy, for being on the show and for giving your amazing story, your amazing perspective on owning your awkward and being who you're really meant to be, regardless of what other people think. And so, everybody, thanks for joining us today. Go out there and be amazing, be who you're meant to be. And like Andy said, go and create the world that you want.